Local presentation of this National Geographic special is made possible in part by the members of New Hampshire Public Television and by grants from the 5 affiliates of Bank of New Hampshire Corporation, serving the central, southern, and seacoast regions of the state, and WHOM FM EZ 95, Northern New England's easy listening radio station from the top of Mount Washington.
This is the winged world. From thousands of voices comes nature's chorus. But there is one, the Australian lyrebird, who alone creates a symphony of the winged world.
Hello, I'm Mike Farrell. Welcome to the best of the National Geographic specials, the landmark series of the National Geographic Society. With these timeless programs, we celebrate the spirit of man's quest for adventure, exploration, and a better understanding of ourselves. Discover with us a universe that still has infinite power to amaze and delight with its beauty, drama, and endless possibilities. Since before the myth of Icarus, right up to the hang-gliding craze of today, man has dreamed of and attempted soaring through the sky like a bird. The grace, coloring, anatomy, and song of these winged creatures have inspired poets, painters, inventors, and composers down through the ages. Birds are perhaps the one animal envied by man. In this film, we'll travel to exotic places in search of little-known secrets about these animals of the air. Let your mind take flight as we discover the mystery and magic of the winged world.
In all of man's time on Earth, there has never been a sky without birds. They came long before us. And for thousands of years, whenever man has looked to the skies, he has admired their beauty, envied their freedom, and wondered at the mystery of their creation. In ancient legend, it is said a bird was dispatched to build a habitable place in which man could dwell. Others believed that birds carried the souls of the dead to paradise. Symbols of strength, of wisdom, of courage, they were often raised to the rank of deities, gods with the power of life and death. Today, in mystic ceremony, men still pray to birds, for they still appear as creatures whose relationship to the heavens is somehow stronger, more binding than our own. In the swamps and forests of prehistoric times, long before the bird appeared, reptiles dominated the land. With the harsh competition for survival, some began to climb trees, for here there was food and relative safety. Then, in some distant ancestor of the lizard or crocodile, there began a change that would forever alter the way of life on Earth. When and how it might have happened has for years intrigued men like naturalist Peter Scott.
So far as we know, between 150 and 200 million years ago, the first birds appeared on Earth. They were probably evolved from reptiles that climbed in the trees. The earliest known bird was called Archaeopteryx. The name means ancient wing, and of course it's only known from fossils. Well, in many ways, Archaeopteryx was still quite like a lizard. It had teeth like a lizard. It had a tail almost like a lizard's, with the vertebrae going right out to the end of it. It had claws on its wings, and this suggests that it spent a great deal of time in the trees. But it did have feathers. So it was a bird, or at least it was an intermediate between reptiles and modern birds.
Life for the ancient birds, as for the young Hoatzin in South America, was precarious. Using their wing claws, they could move from vine to vine. They could probably hop from one boulder to another, perhaps even glide for short distances. Yet they still faced danger of attack from enemies. Though nature had given the ancient birds feathers and wings, other, more perfect birds would in time evolve that could better put them to use. For only if they could escape the earth would they survive. Of all the flying birds in the world, none adapted more remarkably than the hummingbird. This is an Anna's hummingbird. It beats its wings nearly 4,000 times a minute. Perhaps because hummingbirds feed in the deep chalices of flowers, nature gave them the ability to virtually stand still in the air. Through high-speed photography, its motion has been slowed down, so that what is now being seen actually takes place in less than 1/2 of 1 second. Since Archaeopteryx, birds have evolved in a bewildering variety of forms, each suited to survive in its environment. Today, there are more than 8,600 living species, with differing beaks, wings, colors, legs, feet, sizes, and ways of life. For millions of years, birds have populated the earth. And for thousands of years, their total numbers are believed to have remained relatively constant. 100 billion birds. They once escaped, they now return as fishers and hunters, equipped with keen sight and speed and agility. There is almost no place on Earth where birds cannot find the food they need to survive. To those who have watched birds of prey in search of food, the reason for the mythology of courage and power becomes clear. For birds like the red-tailed hawk will challenge enemies even feared by man. Against such enemies, the red-tailed hawk, with powerful legs, sharpened claws, tremendous coordination, and eyes much sharper than man's, has been given the ability to prevail. Birds are among nature's most successful creatures. With flight, their existence has been ensured. There is only one enemy in all the world that can seriously endanger their future, and that is man himself.
Show me your somersault. Here we go. Thank you. We're going to do it again, BB. We're going to somersault some more, BB. We're going to somersault some more, and we're going to do it one more time, BB. BB, somersault one more time. Get a hold of Mel. Thank you.
Birds in captivity have long provided man with many of his notions about bird intelligence. Yet what we see is often little more than mimicry or trained behavior. Some birds in captivity, however, like these cockatoos, do seem to reflect both understanding and perhaps a very special ability.
7. Show them you know what 7 means on that bell. Now 7. Pull it 7 times and then sit down. 7, Ed. 7. Okay, thank you.
Most animal behavior is guided by instinct, but there occasionally come glimpses of something more. In the wild, there are instances where birds use tools, regarded as one measure of intelligence in the animal world. Jane and Hugo van Lorwick-Goodall have filmed the Egyptian vulture gaining access to eggs from an abandoned ostrich nest. Unable to break the shell with its beak, it finds a rock and uses it like a projectile. Men can only conjecture how this amazing creature acquired the ability to use a tool. If, as most believe, it was handed down from its ancestors, the question still remains, how did its ancestors learn? A woodpecker finch listens for insect life in the bark of trees. He is looking for food for himself and his mate, who waits in a nearby tree. Though in many ways he is built like a woodpecker, his beak is not thin enough, nor his tongue long enough to reach the food. So he finds a twig he can use as a tool. Despite his diligence, the stick is too short. So he seeks another instrument that will work better. He finds a cactus thorn and uses it like a crowbar. He places the thorn under his foot while eating, then proceeds to dig for more. When one end is blunted, he tries the other, employing his improvised tool with amazing sureness. Feeding done, his mate flies over to receive her share. On the forest floor in New Guinea, a Gardner bowerbird has built this incredible study in design. This is his place of courtship. Lacking colorful feathers to attract a mate, he has gathered and arranged the brightly colored objects in his surroundings to assist him. In this case, beetles, flowers, and berries. Like a painter at an easel, even with a single flower, he works until he has satisfied his own mysterious artistic ideal. Bowerbirds may spend several months in preparing their sites for courtship. This is the front yard of a greater spotted bowerbird in Australia. He favors white and red and does not discriminate between man-made objects and nature's own. A female has entered his bower. By instinct, he shows her the crest on top of his head. It is the only brightly colored area on his body. He does this merely as a preliminary of courtship. Now, from his collection, he looks for some object he feels will interest her. He appears to be making a conscious choice. What guides him to a decision is unclear, yet it seems to be a choice made only after careful consideration of several alternatives. Having chosen a berry, which he holds in his mouth, he begins his courtship dance. Certain behavior of birds in the wild is defined strictly as instinct. Often it is a matter of survival. A stork in need of food will sometimes attack the chicks of ground-nesting birds like the lapwing. Like most birds, the lapwing attempts to protect its young. When threats fail, the lapwing resorts to the remarkable act of pretending a broken wing. This is done to try to distract the stork's attention from the chick, or perhaps to make it forget what it is doing. Scomer Island off the west coast of Wales is a protected breeding area for seabirds, a perfect place to study the unusual aspects of their behavior. Since the age of 17, British author and naturalist Ronald Lockley has often journeyed here. Intrigued by the ability of some birds to find their way over unfamiliar land and seas, Lockley has devoted most of his life to a study of one, the Manx shearwater, regarded among the most adept long-distance navigating birds in the world.
How are you, boy?
Only a resident warden lives permanently on Scomer. He will assist Lockley on a homing experiment that will explore the shearwater's capabilities when taken away from its familiar surroundings. Scomer's landscape shows little evidence of bird life. Yet beneath the surface are more than 50,000 shearwaters and their young, nesting in abandoned rabbit burrows or ones they have dug themselves. To avoid blocking the entrance to a burrow, Lockley and the warden approach from another direction.
She's biting me now, you little devil. Hello, how are you, my dear?
Because shearwaters are awkward on land, they only exchange places on the nest on dark, overcast nights, when there is less danger of attack by predator birds. Because they can find their way in almost total darkness, Lockley regards them as ideal subjects for homing experiments.
The ring on you now.
He bands this one for identification.
There we go. There we are, that's it.
Soon he will send her to a place she has never been. Her crate must be specially designed. Too large and she can be injured in handling. Spaces between the slats are kept thin so she cannot see, thus minimizing her desire to move around.
Come on. How do you suppose they're going to work? How do you suppose they're going to do the work? Eh? Oh. Very nice, aren't you? Yeah.
June 27th, Lockley goes to inspect the birds. Appearing in good condition, she is taken from the burrow and readied for the trip. From this moment forward, for the better part of a day, she can have no food or water. If she were fed, she could become ill and possibly die. This is the starting point of her journey. And over the next several hours, she will be taken from Skomer, driven across England, and after inspection by health authorities at London Airport, sent across the Atlantic to Boston. On the Boston coastline, Dr. William Drury of the Massachusetts Audubon Society takes the bird to the water's edge. Her breast is marked with a blue dye as extra identification. All is ready. The journey she has made in the dark, by boat, car, and plane, in less than 24 hours, she now must make alone. Thousands of miles from any place she knows, she is released into the wind at 3:15 p.m. and heads out to sea. Whether by sun or stars or the magnetic pull of the globe, by some innate mechanism, she must find her way home. Nights later, July 11th. Lockley goes to the burrow as he has done every night since the sheer water was released from Boston.
Well done, old bird. Clever bird, aren't you?
If for most people, birds are merely a part of the environment, for some, like the fishermen in the Japanese village of Gifu, they mean a great deal more. This is a cormorant, a bird with an exceptional ability to dive for fish. In Gifu, cormorants are household pets 6 months of the year, but for the other 6 months, they must earn their keep. Fishing season runs from May to October, and every day the cormorants are taken to the Nagara River. Because their long necks expand, they can gather and store large amounts of fish. A cord tied around the neck prevents them from swallowing big fish. There is no discomfort. They still can swallow small ones, and they will always be given enough to eat. Wood fires on the prows of the boats are used to attract the fish. The cormorants are released into the water in a predetermined order. Those with seniority must go first. Any change in the order upsets them. Now the 2,000-year-old tradition is carried on. St. Paul is a remote island 275 miles off the Alaskan coast. Its sheer cliffs are the breeding grounds for thousands of Pacific seabirds. Isolated from nearly all human activity, it is an ideal setting for German naturalist, zoologist, and wildlife photographer Heinz Sielmann. In filming the behavior of birds in the wild, Seelman works from a tent called a hide as close as possible to the nesting sites without disturbing the birds. Here he will spend as much as 15 hours a day for as long as 6 months at a time, possibly for 2 straight seasons, until he is finished. This is merely the start of a long-term study of St. Paul's cliff-breeding birds. For the past 15 years, Seelman has traveled to some of the most remote places on Earth and given the world an incredible film record of how birds live. In 1961, Seelman led an expedition to the coast of Peru, site of one of the greatest concentrations of bird life in the world. The waters of the great Humboldt Current from the south teem with life. With this enormous quantity of food available, bird life thrives. "13 miles off the coast, central Chincha Island, a vast breeding colony for 6 million birds. The black fields are cormorants. On the outer edges are the nesting sites of the pelicans. Heavy, prehistoric looking, the pelicans feed at sea and return each day with food they have stored for their young. The appetites of the baby pelicans are nearly insatiable. They demand their food by beating at their parents, and in the competition for food, they will even attack one another. On central Chincha Island, only the strong can survive. Sometimes an epidemic or a change in the Humboldt Current will thin the overpopulated cormorant ranks, but even under normal conditions, survival for some becomes impossible. The weak, the feeble, voluntarily drift away from the colony, and in this cormorant graveyard, they await death. Every day, condors, among the largest scavenger birds in the world, fly over from the Peruvian mainland in search of food. In the savage efficiency of nature, they conduct a death watch. "1,300 miles to the north, Seelman and his research team head to the fabled archipelago called the Galapagos. Formed in the sea by volcanic forces 2 million years ago, the islands of the Galapagos are in many ways truly prehistoric, in what Charles Darwin called this strange cyclopean scene. Life is dictated solely by the forces of nature. Species exist here that exist nowhere else in the world. Landforms evolved from wildlife that came out of the sea or drifted onto the islands a long time ago. Courtship ritual is fundamental to the life of all birds. And on the Galapagos Islands, some of the most intriguing mating ceremonies take place. A male frigate bird displays his brilliant red throat pouch to attract the opposite sex. A hen descends. Now, in a ceremony of recognition and greeting, they agree to mate. This place will be their nesting site. Together, they will defend it. Unique to the the Galapagos is the waved albatross. With a wingspan up to 3 yards, it is regarded as one of the most agile flying birds in the world. For all their skill as flyers, the albatross are among the most awkward on firm ground. With their heavily webbed feet set far back, keeping balance is in itself a major task. For the young albatross, actually the size of a swan, it is even harder. In the breeding season, the albatross of the Galapagos conduct a mating dance that has both puzzled and captivated all who have witnessed it. Albatross normally mate for life, but each season they must get reacquainted. With some species of birds that have a lifetime bond, if one dies, the other may never mate again. Shy and fearful, they first threaten one another. Aggressive behavior often is a preliminary to courtship. It is a language of subtle movements, repeated as many times as each feels is necessary. Some believe that by showing themselves to be vulnerable, they may be telling one another there is no need to be afraid. This seems to be an expression of trust. Through calls and clattering, they greet one another and agree to mate. Now, together, in ritualized ceremony, they point to the place where they will nest. In 1963, Seelman traveled to New Guinea to film the birds of paradise. Birds whose numbers steadily declined as men hunted them for their spectacular courtship feathers. From one, the red bird of paradise, have come the feathers that are given to a Papuan bride. Only males have courtship feathers. Each has his own territory. One branch on a tree which he has cleared of its leaves so that he will be in full view of prospective mates. A female watches from an adjoining tree as the male goes into full display. An immature male also makes an effort at display, but as yet without his courtship feathers, it is only wasted effort. A female has arrived on the branch. The male begins his courtship dance. She climbs around so they can face one another. She has agreed to become his mate. In this land of exotic birds, where almost every mountain forest has its own species, the fleeting images of bird life add to Heinz Seelman's unique store of observations. The ribbon-tail. And the blue bird of paradise, a male in full courtship display. Turned upside down on a branch, he makes this incredible sound. Heinz Seelman has entered the domains of bird life around the world, and with his camera revealed to student and layman alike many new facets of their behavior. We humans, says Seelman, are still very young and inexperienced creatures. Birds have been in nature far longer. I think it is possible, Seelman concludes, that by observing their ways, we may perhaps learn something more about our own behavior and our own place in nature's scheme. Every spring, the Adelie penguins of Antarctica migrate across as much as 60 miles of trackless ice and snow to their breeding grounds. Migration, as one observer put it, is the greatest adventure in the life of a bird, and the greatest risk it must take. Somewhere in their genetic makeup, they have been given the knowledge of where they are going, and some of their journeys are truly epic. Each spring, a tiny ruby-throated hummingbird flies at least 2,000 miles. From as far south as Panama to central Canada. The North American songbird, called the bobolink, makes a yearly migration of nearly 6,000 miles, from South America to the northern United States. Greatest traveler of all is the Arctic tern, which migrates every year from the Arctic to the seas of the Antarctic and then back, a round trip in some cases of as much as 22,000 miles. Each spring, the white storks leave Africa for Europe. Some head around the eastern end of the Mediterranean. Others take the western route over Gibraltar, Spain, and France to nest in Holland and Germany. For all birds who make such journeys, migration is the starting point of the yearly life cycle. Early April in Bergenhausen, a quiet farming village in northern Germany. Almost for as many years as this village has been in existence, its people have marked the beginning of spring with the appearance of the first stork from Africa. For each male, the nest is private territory, and here he will wait for several days or several weeks until the females appear. Unlike some birds, storks do not mate for life. Pairs from the preceding spring do not winter together, so each year, male and female search for new partners. As a mating call, they clap their beaks. Aside from albatross, storks are the only birds who do this. When a female arrives on the nest, the storks clatter in a ceremony of recognition and greeting. Together, they point to the nest. They have agreed to mate. First, there is need for rebuilding. Male and female take turns gathering nest material, but the nest is never left unguarded. When one returns, before all else, it must be recognized by the other. Clattering is also the sign of greeting, one of the methods storks have evolved to keep their nests inviolate. Sometimes, however, they must defend it. Often in the early spring, intruders will try to take prime nests for their own. Males normally carry out the fighting, using their long pointed beaks as weapons. Now, the mates of both males join the fight. Soon the intruder's mate is pushed off. Then the intruder. In his excitement, the defender accidentally strikes his mate, but quickly apologizes. They have retained their home. In Germany, it is said that storks are the bringers of babies, from the waters of the fountain to the mother's lap. Especially now in early May, Villagers never disturb their nests, for it is incubation period for the eggs. Incubation lasts approximately 1 month, and by early June, the first chick emerges. Soon he is joined, and rivalry is instantaneous. There are normally 2 to 4 chicks born to a pair of storks, and both mother and father take turns protecting them. The menu of a stork, says an observer, is a clear picture of the best possibilities. Storks eat almost anything, but gathering food in the high grass is difficult. So they have learned that there are rewards in following the reaper. Even bringing food, the returning parent must be recognized. Now all join in the ceremony of greeting. Storks do not mouth-feed their young. The parent merely delivers the food and the chicks feed themselves. In the first few days of life, they will eat as many as 9 times in 8.5 hours. In succeeding days, they will need much less food. But for the next 2 months, they will be entirely dependent on their parents. In early August, the young have almost reached the end of their fledgling period. Seldom fed, they now have their feathers and the urge to fly. But as it has ever been for young birds with the capability of flight, they must first exercise. Within weeks, they will take their first uneasy excursion from the nest. Within a month, they will leave the nest forever. All relationships will be dissolved. They will go out into the field, feed on their own, and in September, make their own way to Africa. The breeding cycle is at an end. Birds have been called nature's most eloquent expression. They have survived an epoch that began long before man, and have added in ways almost impossible to measure to man's spirit. They are the 100 billion creatures who, taken all together, comprise the winged world. Our world would be empty without them.
With a population of approximately 100 billion, it seems unlikely that birds are endangered. Yet that enormous population is broken into a myriad of species, some of which are threatened, while others are already extinct. Of the 8,600 species still in existence, at least 200 are endangered today. Birds are the result of tens of millions of years of evolution. What has been called nature's most eloquent expression has surely earned the right to exist. Next time on the best of the National Geographic specials, we'll take a look at other fascinating corners of our ever-changing and ever-expanding world. Till then, I'm Mike Farrell for the National Geographic Society.
When the city of Chicago decided it needed a new public library, a war was begun. Stay tuned for a look at the competition between architects for the job and the designs that they hoped would win on Nova next. But before that, a short story about a special bird and a moment with Jack Horkheimer, the star hustler. He'll show you what to look for in the sky tonight. Then remember to tune in for another National Geographic special on Australia tonight at 8, followed by Nature at 9.
Local presentation of this National Geographic special is made possible in part by the members of New Hampshire Public Television and by grants from the 5 affiliates of Bank of New Hampshire Corporation, serving the central, southern, and seacoast regions of the state, and WHOM FM Easy 95, Northern New England's easy listening radio station from the top of Mount Washington.